Hi, welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, history, politics, the culture, and pretty much anything else that takes my fancy. This podcast can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, and hopefully iHeartRadio pretty soon. And the opening music and the closing music that you hear is written and performed by my brother Paul Mashler. And thank you, Paul. All right, so today I wanted to talk about something that has caught my attention recently. I mean, it's something I've been thinking about for a while. But I picked up a book that helped bring some clarity on the subject to me. But I want to talk about how to not raise snowflakes. And when I talk about snowflakes, I mean a few things. First of all, it's what you think of when you think of snowflakes, which is college students who go off to college and they want safe spaces, and they say things like microaggressions, like words have violence, and they have a call-out culture where they shout down anybody that they don't like, and they take offense easily. So that's one way that I mean snowflakes, but also snowflakes in the sense that we have students or college students and young adults who just don't seem to have matured as much as they should have, and so they are dropping out of college as freshmen. Even in our church we see some leaving their missions early, and this has been coming for some time now, but it just seems to be getting worse recently, in the last year or two. So, and the funny thing is that we all give millennials a hard time, but after reading the book and talking to people, I realize it's not millennials that are doing this. The millennials are not the snowflakes. The snowflakes are the people that came after the millennials, the Gen Z or the iGen, whatever you prefer. This book, which I rely heavily on, which is called The Coddling of the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff, I hope I said that right, and Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. Anyway, they talk about iGen, and these are people who were born in 95 and after. It's basically people who were born at a time when the iPhone was out. So that's why they get called the iGen. But basically, these are people who were raised right from the beginning with tech. And millennials kind of came in a little bit earlier, and so they had part of their childhood maybe not as techy, whereas the Gen Z or the iGen folks have had tech their whole life. And so that's one of the reasons why they picked that time period as a designation. I had some millennials tell me recently that they don't put any stock into the groupings, that they think it's just for marketing purposes, which I'm sure that's part of it. But for purpose of this discussion, it's individuals who have been subject to technology their entire lives. So we see here, obviously, that there's a lack of maturity and a lack of resilience and a lack of self-reliance. It just feels to me like some of them are still a little infantile, perhaps. And it's not to make fun of them or point a finger at them, because this is the way they were raised. This is what the generation that they were brought up in. And it's our job as parents to make sure we don't do this to our kids going forward. So I wanted to talk first about some of the causes for this, and then let's go into the solutions. So like I mentioned, I'm going to be using the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, for quite a bit of this discussion. Also, one of the reasons I started thinking about it was because I read this article in the Ensign called Resilience, Spiritual Armor for Today's Youth. And I believe this was in September. Anyway, no, September of 2019, Ensign article by Elder Lynn G. Robbins. And if you're not familiar with the Ensign, it's a magazine that is put out by my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the article goes into more of the spiritual aspects as well, which I'm not going to touch on much here because I wanted this to be open to everyone, not just those who are members of the church. But if you are a member of the church, go find the article, the September Ensign, if you haven't read it. Anyway, so causes. Well, like I touched on already, too much time on devices. All right, so there's too much exposure to unrealistic virtual or pretend world, causing distorted self-image, anxiety, depression, and lower self-worth. And obviously, most of that is from social media. We see that on Facebook and Instagram and other places. Those are the ones that I'm most familiar with. And I can definitely see why this would cause big problems. When I was growing up, I didn't have Facebook, so I wasn't posting everything I was doing like I am now. Yes, I know. I'm a big Facebook person, so I don't have a lot of room to talk. But just from my time on there, I can see, first of all, that it's addictive because we get addicted to the likes. Same thing on Instagram. Any place else where it allows you to like each other's posts or pictures. And so you get that little hit. And that's a purposeful thing. It was created this way. They wanted us to be addicted to these platforms. So we keep coming back, and we do. But there's a difference between adults getting those hits and recognizing what's going on and being able to put the device away or log out of Facebook, and kids growing up with that from a young age and not understanding that it's not all important to have all of these likes, and then comparing themselves constantly to everybody else on these platforms, and seeing that they look like they're living these perfect lives. We all have that, but for kids, it's just much more difficult. And that obviously contributes to anxiety and depression. And that's one of the things that they found in this book, is that a lot of students that are going into college, and there's a lot more anxiety and depression diagnoses in college than there has been in the past. And that's a big part of it. So social media, and I'm guessing video games, because that's a pretend world, doesn't help either. So, and then we have impatience in a world of instant gratification. I mean, when you can Google up the answer, or my daughters always say, search up, go search that up. I never heard the search up until they talked to me, but you can go to Google and find answers instantly, or you go to Alexa or whatever. And so now when we have to wait for an answer or research an answer, it's easy to become impatient. And obviously that does not lead to resilience or self-reliance if you don't want to look for answers. You just want them instantly, right now. Another reason is protection from rough seas, and by that we mean making the road too smooth for our kids, so they don't have to do anything hard. We've made everything really easy for them, and we'll get into more of that later. Innumerable options to distract us. Fake news and half-truths that confuse us. So there's a ton out there to distract us. Again, it's a lot of screen time, whether it's the devices or TV, although it's less for TV for kids now, but iPads. My daughters like to spend a ton of time on TikTok, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with TikTok, but all of that time on there, it's a distraction from other things they could be doing. And then when you're on social media or YouTube or watching TV or whatever, there's tons of fake news and a lot of half-truths. And there's obviously an agenda with the media. The media wants us to be offended and pick a side and only look at our tribe and not listen to the other side and what they have to say. So everything is kind of distorted. We spend too much time paying attention to the media, social media and news media. I'm using that term news loosely here. But we have all this half-truth and distortion going on. Too much digital FaceTime and not enough FaceTime face-to-face time, resulting in underdeveloped interpersonal skills. That's kind of like when you see two friends sitting next to each other and texting each other. Why would you do that when you can just turn and look at each other? And so, I mean, I even see it. I teach college, and I get papers turned in that were obviously done on a phone or on an iPad. There's very little punctuation, not a lot of capitalization, and it's like, can you not even put your device down long enough to go and actually write a paper? But and then when they send email to me, a lot of times it's very informal, because that's what they learn, texting. It's very short bursts of communication, and you don't have to put a lot of thought into it, and you don't have to see the person. So therefore, when they get around other people, they don't know how to handle it. And that takes me to the next cause, which is not enough free play time outside. And I don't know how many of you were raised in the 70s or the 60s or the 80s or anything, but I was mostly raised in the 70s. I was born in 68. And I can remember most of my childhood consisting of coming home, doing whatever little homework I had. There's another issue, homework. And there's way too much on elementary age students, which leads to what part of the problem is that I'm talking about right now. Not enough free time to play outside. And free time outside with other kids without adult supervision is huge. And like I was about to say, is that I used to come home, do whatever little homework I had, if I had any, and then go out, jump on my bike and go find my friends and hang out and do whatever we would do, whether that meant exploring the neighborhood, going and finding something to play, or just riding around the neighborhood, whatever, but we would hang out and come up with stuff to do on our own. And so some of the problems that we have with that not happening now is that first of all, we have play dates, right? I remember realizing this recently, that my kids don't really do this much. I mean, every once in a while they'll say they want to go to the park, and I'll say, well, go then. Even though in the back of my mind there's this little concern of, is there going to be some other adult out there who's going to see my 11 and 10 and 8-year-olds out there without an adult and call the cops because, ooh, scary. But anyway, I asked my 11-year-old the other day, why don't you just ride your bike over to your friend's house? And she said, well, we have to have a play date. We can't just go over. What? Why not? And I realized that's what we've all been conditioned to do now as adults, is we have to have play dates set up with other parents to get our kids together. We did not have play dates in the 70s or the 80s. And the book talks about the reason for that. And the biggest reason for that is that, I don't know how many of you remember John Walsh, and he lost his son, Adam Walsh. He was kidnapped. Anyway, he led a big movement that got all these missing kids pictures on milk cartons. And so we grew up with, kids on milk cartons, and so that kind of sunk into the culture, and everyone became afraid of kids being kidnapped. But actually, crime has gone way down in the 90s and in the 2000s, way lower than it was in the 70s and 80s. So we got much more paranoid when we didn't need to be. We needed to be the opposite. We need to allow more free-range parenting. But anyway, the book talks about how free playtime outside allows kids to, first of all, test themselves a little bit, go out and do things that are slightly dangerous so that they can develop the skills to handle those kind of things. Another thing, and to act through the fear, right? You see something that's a little scary, and you go ahead and you move forward to do whatever it is that you're going to do anyway. And another thing that the book kind of just briefly mentions is that when kids get used to handling problems among themselves with no parent or adult coming in to monitor it or to mediate it, they learn how to handle problems themselves amongst themselves. You know, like if you watch Stranger Things, you see these kids running around and handling all these crazy things, but they did it because they were allowed to do it, and they went out and figured it out. Kids are a lot more they're much more able to come up with solutions on their own than we give them credit for, because we're not allowing them to do it anymore. But the problem is, when we don't allow them to do that, they will look for authority figures to come in and handle their problems. And in a free society, that's a problem. We do not want kids to grow up into adults who are constantly looking to the government to make things fair for them, to make that person stop hurting their feelings, to make people stop saying mean things. We don't want that in a free society. We want students or kids to grow up into adults who have learned how to handle a little opposition and learned interpersonal skills. If the kid next to them is being mean, they might turn to their friend and say, let's go play with someone else. This kid's being mean, instead of let's go find mommy and make that kid stop being mean. And because that turns into let's go find a politician somewhere to write a law to make that person stop being mean. We don't need that. We don't need kids growing up in that way. But that's a real danger. So these are all the causes, or some of the causes. I'm sure there are more, but these are the ones that I want to touch on. And so as we move forward in life, we see that things are not getting better. In our church, we talk about we are heading into last days, and we see more wars and rumors of wars and things that you read about in the Bible is heading towards the second coming. And so many of us believe that things are just going to continue to get worse. So we do not want kids who can't handle these things. We do not want infantile adults. So we've got to do something to change that. Well, some of the solutions obviously arise from acknowledging the problems and pointing out what the problems are. And one of the first ones is to teach self-reliance. Don't do hard things for the kids. Teach them how to do the hard things and then let them do them themselves. So in other words, teach them correct principles and then let them govern themselves. All right, so instead of trying to control the kid or do things for the kids, coach them. Don't take their burdens away from them. Strengthen them so that they can handle the burdens. Like with my girls, I'm always telling them, my goal is that when you leave here as an adult at 18 to go off to do whatever you're going to do, that you can handle anything that comes your way. That you know how to do everything that I do around the house. You know how to do all your chores. You know how to clean everything. You know how to do laundry. You know how to do dishes. You know how to cook. You know how to budget. You know how to shop. You know how to handle bills. But also that you know how to do hard things, that you've taught yourself and you've learned to experience how to do hard things. Right? And there's a John Roberts quote in this book that I wanted to read to you. And this was from a speech that he made at his son's middle school graduation. So think about the age that these kids are at. And he says, "From time to time in the years to come, I hope you will be treated unfairly so that you will come to know the value of justice. I hope that you will suffer betrayal because that will teach you the importance of loyalty. Sorry to say, but I hope you will be lonely from time to time so that you don't take friends for granted. I wish you bad luck again from time to time so that you will be conscious of the role of chance in life and understand that your success is not completely deserved and that the failure of others is not completely deserved either. And when you lose, as you will from time to time, I hope every now and then your opponent will gloat over your failure. It is a way for you to understand the importance of sportsmanship. I hope you'll be ignored so you know the importance of listening to others. And I hope you will have just enough pain to learn compassion. Whether I wish these things or not, they're going to happen. And whether you benefit from them or not will depend upon your ability to see the message in your misfortunes." So when your kids are going through difficult times, instead of trying to take away those difficult times, get in there and help them to work through them. Like with your kids getting bullied at school, your first instinct shouldn't be to run to the school and talk to the principal. You make that bully stop. Well, let's talk about it. What's happening? Who is this kid? What's he saying to you? What could you do next time that he bullies you? How can you handle that? Train your kids to handle hard stuff. Don't try and make the way too easy for them. This morning when my 8-year-old was leaving for school, before she walked out the door, she looked at me and she said, "I don't feel very good." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" She said, "My tummy hurts and my head hurts." And this is kind of typical, and I know that sometimes when she has anxiety, it goes to her stomach. And I said, "Well, if you keep feeling bad, go to the nurse and she'll call me and I can come get you." And she wasn't happy about that, but she accepted it. And because she knows that's the answer I always give her. Unless there's a fever or I can see that there's something going on, I send them to school when they're not feeling well. Because I want them to learn that, even though your day didn't start well, you can turn it around. And even though you might not feel great now, you'll probably feel a little bit better later. So I told her this. She heads out the door, and as soon as she takes her first step down the steps, she falls, and she didn't hit her head, but she fell hard on the steps because they were icy. I had no idea. I would have put rock salt down on. I don't want anyone, breaking arms if they don't have to. But anyway, she fell and she started crying, and my first instinct was, oh, she's already having a bad morning. I'm just going to keep her home with me. And then cooler thoughts came in and said, no, this is a really good time to teach her that, yes, your day has started out crappy, but it doesn't have to stay that way. You don't have to give into this. So I put some shoes on and almost slipped myself going down, but I went down to the bottom step and helped her get back up again, hugged her, told her I loved her, and that I would see her at the end of the day. And so I'm hoping that from that she learns, I fell down, but I got back up and I kept going, and I'm fine. I do not want my girls to grow up that as soon as they hit some adversity, they fold like a cheap suit. I want them to learn that they can keep going and be stronger for it. So all day, of course, I'm worrying about her. I'm curious to know how she's doing, but she's there and I'm here. Anyway, all right, so playing without a parent supervision or free-range parenting would be huge for our kids. And I know that there's always that worry that the cops are going to be called. One of the things that the book recommends is that you give them this thing that's called a Let Grow license. And if you go to letgrow.org, it's a website where they have a Let Grow license. But it's basically a piece of paper that you give to the kids. And here's what this one says. My name is blank. This is a paper they can keep with them so that when they're running around the neighborhood, if some adult bugs them about where's their parent, they can show them this paper. My name is blank. I am not lost or neglected. I have been taught how to cross the street. I know never to go off with strangers, but I can talk to them, including you. The state allows parents to decide at what age their child can do some things independently. Mine believe it is safe, health, and fun for me to explore my neighborhood. If you do not believe me, please call or text them at the numbers below. If you still think it is inappropriate or illegal for me to be on my own, please, number 1, read Huckleberry, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. 2, remember your own childhood. Were you under adult supervision at every moment? Today's crime rate is back what it was in 1963, so it's safer to play outside now than when you were my age. Visit the website letgrow.org. Parent's name, parent's signature, parent's phone, alternate phone. I really like this. And so if adults hassling you, give them that paper. Then let them go home and decide whether they want to interfere. Or if they want to call the parent. At least that's better than calling the cops. But we need to get in the habit of letting kids play with other kids. Find other parents that are like-minded and let them free range. I am always encouraging my kids, go to the park. Go, ride your bike. I do give them a flip phone, so if they want to call me, they can. They don't have smartphones for all the reasons we mentioned above. Oh, and by the way, there are now phones that are, I just saw this on Facebook yesterday, and I can't remember what it was called, Gab phone, I think, G-A-B-B, that looks like a smartphone, so kids aren't embarrassed by their flip phone, but it only allows calling and texting, and I think that was about it. There are no apps or anything else, but it allows the kids to call or text and nothing else. So I would say limiting screen time. I would not give kids younger than 15 or 16 a smartphone. That's just me. I just think that you're really going to hamstring those kids by letting them get on there with the social media. And not to mention pornography, so easy to access. That's a whole other discussion, but we don't want kids exposed to that before they need to be. And then you need to talk to them about it, by the way. But anyway, so limiting their screen time. The kids should not go to bed with their phones. I don't allow phones my kids don't have smartphones. I don't allow iPads in their room after a certain time. I certainly don't allow them to be in their room when they sleep. And there's a really handy thing that we should all have. I have on my phone that controls Wi-Fi. So if the kids aren't listening to me when I say you're done, I just turn off the Wi-Fi on that device. You can do it by device. You don't have to turn it off on the whole house. So limit their screen time. Look at the apps your children are using. Are they old enough to handle Facebook or Instagram? If they're like middle school or younger, definitely not. And as they get older, you might want to monitor that and give it to them in little chunks at a time. All right, so and I would say limiting screen time in general to no more than a few hours a day. They do not need to be sitting on their laptop or PC or anywhere for hours and hours at a time. So like I said, again, turn it off if they won't get off. And then send them outside to play. Okay. All right, teach middle schoolers and high schoolers how to debate. If they're in high school or middle school and they have a debate club at their school, have them sign up for it. This is a way that they can use logic and facts and not ad hominem or personal attacks. They need to learn the difference. They need to learn critical thinking, so they can tell the difference between fake news and real news. And so they're not afraid of viewpoints that are different than their own. Teach them to think through their problems instead of just going with their feelings, right? Teach them mindfulness. Coach that and model that for them. If they're feeling upset about something, sit down and talk to them about it. And say, well, where is this coming from? And think it through. Teach them to think it through. There's cognitive behavioral therapy and techniques that if your kids are just using emotion, look that up. Cognitive behavioral therapy, and teach them techniques on that, how to sit with feelings and not acting on them immediately. That's what a lot of the snowflakes are doing at college. They feel a certain way and they think that, okay, if I feel this way, it must be. If I'm afraid, there must be something dangerous. Well, we all feel fear and anxiety throughout the day. That doesn't mean there's something dangerous. So we need to teach kids to not just trust their feelings all the time. If they graduate from high school and they still don't seem ready for college, encourage them to get a job. Maybe go live with some roommates for a while, live on their own. Maybe go and do some service for a year, serving a mission if you're part of the church. If you don't think they're ready for a mission, then I think you need to teach them some more. Toughen them up a little bit, get them ready, and then send them. They need to learn how to be on their own. So encourage them to go off and do something. The book talks about a gap year. That's pretty common in England. There's nothing wrong with a gap year. Let the kids go and do some exploration if they didn't do it in high school. Research the colleges before you send kids to them. Make sure these colleges aren't fostering call-out culture where they shut down speeches when people that come in and give speeches, or they shout other students down, or they say things like microaggression or safe spaces. When you look at a college, explore the culture, figure out what that college is all about. Are they teaching the kids to look for truth? Are they teaching them free speech? Are they teaching them scholarship? Or are they just teaching them social justice? These are things you want to check before you send them off to college. And this book, The Coddling of American Mind, goes into a lot more detail about what you want to look for when you're sending them to college. So I hope this is helpful for you. There are a lot of articles on resilience, but let's pay attention to what our kids are doing and how they're growing up. Let's make sure that they're exposed to enough play, especially play without adult supervision and in the neighborhood and physical play. And let's teach them how to think through their problems and to, let's not make the way so easy for them. Life is not going to be easy for them, and they're going to discover that in college or on missions or in their first job. So let's make sure that we're preparing them before we send them out into the world. All right, and I will link to the article and to the book on AnnetteTalks.com. If you have comments on this episode or on any other episodes, please go ahead and comment on AnnetteTalks.com, or you can find me on YouTube, YouTube.com/Annette Talks, Facebook.com/Annette Talks, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, like I said. I'm also working on some more upcoming episodes and civil discourse episodes where I have people. I've decided that I'm going to let them debate because my first one was a little bit too tepid. But if you have other topics you want me to talk about or issues you want me to have people debate, shoot me an email at Annette@AnnetteTalks.com or comment on any of those places I just mentioned. All right. Thanks for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness.